Retro.
Hello there. This is James Arnold Taylor, the voice of Obi-Wan Kenobi, and whenever I'm in this part of the galaxy, I listen to Dennis and Jay on Podcast Stardust. Makes flying a little more tolerable. Don't tell Anakin.
Welcome to Podcast Stardust. This is the fully armed and operational podcast dedicated to Star Wars news, reviews, and discussion. I'm Dennis Keithley.
And I'm Jay Krebs.
And this episode features the next entry in our series dedicated to the 25th anniversary of the Phantom Menace. I have a couple fun guests joining us here in a moment, but before we get into that, Jay, I want to remind everybody where we can be found around the internet.
Awesome. We can be found on Facebook, Instagram, and X conveniently at Podcast Stardust.
All right. The disc is aligned. The signal is boosted to maximum output. The shield is down. We are now broadcasting to the galaxy. So we are getting into the final battles in this entry in the series. And this is full speed ahead from here on out. And we may not actually get to 12 episodes. Next month when we record the 11th part, that might take us to the end of the movie. But yeah, this is going to be a fun discussion coming up here.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a really action-packed one, too.
Indeed. Well, let's not waste any time. Let's get right to it. Here is our discussion. Now we are pleased to be joined by not one, but two guests. We're making up for the absence of guests from the last two segments we've done on this. First, we've got Craig Dickinson from Reading Between the Reels. How are you this evening, Craig?
I'm doing great. I'm so happy to be here. Very excited to talk Star Wars. So yeah, let's do it.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. And from Teachers in the Dungeon, we've got Tom Gross.
Hello, it's great to be here. I always love coming on to your show with you guys, and so this is great. Looking forward to the discussion.
Excited to have you both here this evening. And as I mentioned, schedule-wise and health-wise, we weren't able to get guests for the last two segments of our Phantom Menace series, so we're doubling up this evening, and we got two good ones. But we like to start these segments off by asking our guests some general questions about their experience with the Phantom Menace. Jay, I'll go ahead and lead this off this time, and we'll start with Craig for this question. But can you tell us about your first experience seeing the Phantom Menace? Do you remember where you saw it, who you were with, and what your initial reaction was?
I do, and you just a little bit of a bittersweet thing. I didn't get to see it the first day, and thanks for bringing that up. It came out on a Wednesday, and I saw it that Friday, and so I remained spoiler free mostly. I had heard about Qui-Gon's noble end. I think most of us had, and so that was not too big of a surprise. But I went with my family at I'm trying to remember, the Cinemark, I think it was, in my hometown, and I loved it from the beginning. Like I was all in. It was a lot of new stuff, and then as soon as I started to see things rhyme, I got very excited about that. And I've always had a soft place in my heart for this film, and bought a lot of the merch, and still love it.
Fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Tom, how about you?
Yeah, so when Phantom Menace came out, I was working 3 jobs
Wow.
in the process of going back to school. And so I did not see it right away. However, one of my jobs, I was working at Target stores. And so I'd seen all of the merchandise that had come out for it, and I'd already read the book, and so I had a pretty good idea of what I was getting myself into when I did go to see it. Ended up seeing it by myself because just time and trying to meet up with friends and things like that. And I will say, it's pretty well recorded in many places that I am a big fan of the book. So my initial reaction to the film was not quite as stellar as my look back on the movie. My reflections of it are much more gracious than my initial viewing. But again, when you read the book and you're inside the thoughts of the characters and you get more detail, the movie is almost doomed to fail, no matter what it is that you're watching. So my initial wasn't that great, but indeed, these days it is a pleasure to watch this film.
That's fantastic. Yeah, and it's crazy, when you read a book and then you go into the theater and you have, a certain expectation for sure. But it's good to know that you're a fan of the book too.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Which cover do you have?
I have the Maul cover.
The Maul cover, fantastic.
Nice.
Do you have the
Yeah.
book, Craig?
I do not. I have read it, and I agree. There's so much like the old intro thing with the Anakin and the sand people stuff, and
Mhm.
Mhm.
yeah, there's a lot of insights that are super valuable. That I can see that, Tom, that we had thinking that was going to be part, and then not being there.
Right.
I
That
hear
is
you.
actually that's the big part that I was like, well, why are we starting here?
Mhm.
Oh, it's such a great revisit, though. We just did an episode not too long ago covering the novelization again. So
Oh.
it's always good to hear there's other fans out there. That's for
Oh
sure.
yeah.
Yeah. So we'll go ahead with our second question. So once again, Craig, we'll start with you. What is your favorite scene from the Phantom Menace?
Oh, that's tough. But if I have to narrow it down, if I have to pick one, I'm gonna go with the Obi-Wan Maul fight after Qui-Gon is struck down. Just when he comes through the door and it's so fast and it's you get like full frame, you get to see that it's actually the actors doing it, and I just love it. I get pumped every time I watch that part.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, that's a good one. And Tom, what about you?
My moment is right before that. I love the moment when Obi-Wan is in those force doors or whatever those phase doors are, and he's having to wait. And when he kneels down and meditates while they are fighting, I was like, this tells me so much about Obi-Wan Kenobi. To see his training in practice here, to see how he has approached his training, and that meditation and patience have always been an important part of Obi-Wan's life. And so that sort of tension of him waiting to get into the battle is one of my favorites, because you are like, I'm trying to relax like Obi-Wan is, but as the viewer, I am so stressed and just enjoying that moment. So that's cool that mine is right before yours, Craig.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Should have had you all on next month. We were actually going to cover that scene.
I know. I was just thinking that. I was like,
All right. Well, off by one. Okay. Well, the final question we got before we get into the segment is, who is your favorite character in the Phantom Menace? And Tom, we'll let you kick this one off.
That's a great question. I would say after many years and many readings of different book series and things like that, I want to say the introduction of Padmé Amidala in Phantom Menace is probably my favorite. Learning about her as a character, I enjoyed her command, and she really reminded me of Princess Leia in watching the Phantom Menace, and she's just a charming character. Natalie Portman does a great job, I feel, of portraying her. And so I would say Padmé Amidala.
Okay.
Love that.
I like it. And Craig?
Qui-Gon Jinn, no question. Yeah, he's one of my favorite Jedi, period. And you hear oftentimes about the machete order and things like that. Oh, we can just skip Phantom Menace. Yeah, but then you'd lose Qui-Gon. Like that's
Right.
like my first
Right.
immediate thing. And him being kind of the prototypical, the Jedi, the way it's supposed to go, and where you see it ultimately come kind of full circle with Luke, and getting to see that backstory of how the beginning of Jedi joining the Force, and some of that ancillary stuff that comes up later, and it's hard to watch it without thinking of him reappearing in the Clone Wars and even in Obi-Wan. But yeah, I've always liked Liam Neeson as a character, as an actor rather, and I just think he's a solid center of this film.
That's fantastic. Yeah, it's so great that we got so many new characters. I mean, thinking back on this now, I mean, we take it so much for granted, but at the time when it was so new, it was just, wow. I just think back and think, gosh, that we were just so treated to just these amazing new characters. So, yeah,
Mhm.
good stuff.
not had an opportunity to tell the story, but I'm going to take it now because we brought up Liam Neeson and Qui-Gon Jinn. But back when this movie came out, I had seen it. I've told the story a couple of times, but I got to go to a pre-screening like 2 weeks in advance, courtesy of a friend who was doing PR with Pizza Hut. So this didn't bother me, or didn't affect me personally, I should say. But I was listening to one of the local rock stations, and the host of the morning show had been invited to an advanced screening of the movie. And this was back in the day when fans would line up for weeks and months at a time.
Mhm.
And so he was talking to someone who had been doing just that, had been lined up for several weeks to see the movie on his show. Well, it all of a sudden got real quiet on the radio show. He had muted his microphone and spoiled Qui-Gon getting killed for this guy who had been waiting for weeks.
Oh no! I don't think
And
I've
just played
ever
it
heard
off
you
like it
tell
was
that
like the
story.
funniest thing. And I mean, there was, and he didn't blurt it out over his, of course, the radio show. Like I said, he muted the mic, but when it came out, what he'd done, he had a ton of angry Star Wars fans calling him
Yeah.
to let him have it about that, and justifiably so.
Oof.
So, all right, well, let's dive into the segment. We'll be starting at 1 hour, 44 minutes and 38 seconds and running to about 1 hour, 54 minutes and 39 seconds. Almost a perfect 10-minute segment. That never, ever happens, but we just had 2 good breaks. So that's what we did this time around. But this all starts off with Darth Sidious via hologram and the Naimodians with Darth Maul at their side discussing the impending battle. The Trade Federation is going to send their army to meet the Gungans in the swamp. And this very brief segment ends with the iconic "wipe them out," all of them line from Sidious there. I think this is the last time we see Sidious in this segment. So it gives me an opportunity to ask you both. Craig, we'll go with you first. What do you think of Sidious in this movie? And, he is our titular Phantom Menace in all of this.
I love the fact that they have the dual identities in there, and that I love the fact that they didn't actually tell us that it was Ian McDiarmid playing Darth Sidious. They try to kind of make that a secret. In this particular scene, one thing that I think has kind of become clear to me is he hates Gungans a lot.
Yes.
Like there's some venom in there that's kind of been probably festering for a while. Like he's a xenophobe, I think, very much so. I mean, we see that later on in the way the Empire works too, with almost exclusively humans. So, no, I love the portrayal of him in this film. I love the thing that's been like, I'm not the first one to point it out, not by a long shot, that we get to hear the Emperor's theme at the end during the parade. That there's a lot of hints toward things that are to come, but that's just enough. If you don't know that he's the Emperor, that it's a little bit of a ride if you want to take that.
Mm-hmm.
And Tom, how about you?
Yeah, I think he's portrayed very well in the film as, he's a threat, and everything he says is with malice, and his hood is over his eyes, and the language he uses throughout the film is very final. Like this quote that you read, wipe them out, all of them. That's his tone, I feel like, throughout the entire film. And so, yeah, he sets up a wonderful villain. When through marketing, we really thought that Darth Maul was going to be our guy, and just like he's always wanted it, Sidious is always in the shadows, but quite threatening.
Mm-hmm. Question for the floor here on this: did anyone not know that Sidious and Palpatine were the same person going into this movie or during this movie?
No, I knew. I mean, in the book said it's Emperor Palpatine, right? So you knew when you bumped into Palpatine, it was going to be him. But I always just love the fact that, like, this master stroke of casting that, when they make Return of the Jedi, they cast this 30-something Ian McDiarmid, and then 20 years later, he can play a younger version of himself.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. Good point. Mm-hmm. And the other thing I love about the whole, wipe them out, all of them, it's like, it's not just the Gungans. He's done with everybody on Naboo. The Padmé and the Jedi and her guard, whereas earlier in the movie, it was so important to keep her alive so that he could get a treaty signed and justify everything that was going on there and put his plans in forward. He's like, and he's beyond that now. It's like, nah, don't need it. At this point, of course, Palpatine's the chancellor. And so he's got more power than he started this whole thing with, because his scheme took a turn and does not need her at all. So yeah, get rid of them all.
And it's such a important line, because I think about all the people that he probably knows
Mhm.
and has worked with on Naboo, from being the senator and the former allies, and just it really shows how cold and heartless he has become. With it's a powerful line for anything. And you flash forward to A New Hope when they just destroy Alderaan without any thought. But this is kind of a precursor of all of that. Just kill them all.
Mhm. So the movie then moves on to this iconic shot that they used in the trailer, and it comes up all the time in retrospectives for Star Wars. But it's the Gungans emerging from the swamp. They're mounted on their canoe. You don't even necessarily realize at first that they're coming up out of the water as they emerge from the swamp there. And then you get to see the Fambas, the big dinosaur-looking things, carrying the shield generators, and they march out there into the plain. They fire up the shield, and then they kind of settle down because the droid army comes up over the hill. You get to see the tanks and the carriers and everything. Great setup. They don't actually even get into the battle at this moment here, but they're certainly setting the table. Craig, I mean, your whole podcast is about movies, and you discuss an awful lot of scenes and the way things are composed and that type of thing. What did you make of this scene?
Well, I mean, the first thing I have to point out is how brilliant the sound design is. It's so threatening, especially those tanks. And also, like, the CGI still holds up, which is remarkable. Like those landscapes look real, which is fantastic. And then the biggest thing I look at is just the brilliant, very simple composition. It's it's traditional. You get your good guys on the left, bad guys on the right, and every time I have to throw this in. Every time I watch Infinity War, I go, wow, they borrowed a lot from the ground battle of Naboo, because it's set up pretty much exactly the same.
I had never thought of that before.
Neither
That's
had I.
outstanding.
Yeah.
I'm a little flabbergasted. That is awesome. I got to go back and watch that now.
Right? I'll never watch it the same way again.
I mean, it's an homage, right? They're not ripping them off. It's
Sure.
somebody
Sure.
saw Star Wars, and that's fine. I mean, we're all huge fans, so. But I'm like, yeah,
Absolutely.
that looks really familiar.
Oh,
Mhm.
wow.
And what kind of impression did this make on you, Tom?
So what I love about this is, and it's there's nothing novel here, but it's what resonates with me is, the Gungans, it's the conflict that's set up. You've got nature versus technology here. And so the Gungans coming out of the forest, and they're on natural mounts, creatures. And even the technology that they have is in defense and not, offense or attack. It's this giant shield generator, and they have native weapons, and they're in the field, and it just feels, like they're woefully unprepared when those tanks and droid transports come over, and you've got the engines running, and even when the commander droid says fighter, the noise, and to your point, Craig, the sound is just so strikingly different than what we experienced when the Gungans came out onto the battlefield. And so, yeah, I'm struck by the native nature, simple quiet of the Gungans, and the loud, huge guns, commanders, military of the Separatist army. And I love how that is set up here.
Yeah. And then, Craig, I guess you brought up the whole idea of the ring theory earlier. And this, of course, is a reflection of obviously the Ewoks and the Stormtroopers from Return of the Jedi. Technology on one side versus the quote unquote primitives on the other. All right. Well, then we head into Theed. And of course, the battle between the Gungans and the droids is supposed to be the big diversion so that Padmé and the Jedi can get into the palace. And that's where we get the start of this. with Padmé signaling Panaka to start her attack. And then Qui-Gon tells Anakin to find a safe place to hide when they get inside, and then to stay there. And then the guards roll out their hover vehicle, shoot the droid tank, and the battle begins there. And then while people are fighting on one side, the Jedi and Padme make their way into the hangar. So this is the well-conceived plan that we got laid out for us in the last segment here. Tom, what did you think about Padme's plan and this front of it?
When you're watching the film and you're following the story along, it's like she's more than just a figurehead. She's got strategy, and she's willing to work with the Jedi and her own security force. And in this really works out well for them. The city is quite sparse of like security of the droids and whatnot. This is a scene that really strikes me when I watch the movie today, especially after reading the E.K. Johnston Padme trilogy, where it is portrayed in that novel and it's the part we don't see in the film. And no criticism of the film. It's just it's an addition of what we don't see, and that is that there are prison camps, and the people of Naboo are not treated well, and there are sick people and there are injured people, and the droids are heartless. And so when you watch this now with that context, it's like it is a moment of liberation when they go into that when they go back into the city and they invade in the street. And that, you mentioned it, Dennis, the hovercraft blowing up the tank. You can't help but just pump your fists like, here we go. And so I love this scene because it does set up everything that's going to be happening over the next, really the conclusion of the movie, but especially in our segment, it plays out through the entire 10 minutes.
I'm so glad you brought that up, Tom, because I feel exactly the same way, about watching this all play out in Theed and just knowing that backstory now of those prison camps and everything that was happening at the time, because it really does add another layer of, just the volatile nature of what was going on at the time. And even just seeing some of Padme's, handmaidens in the background, like Arete, for example, the one blonde handmaiden that she had, and now we know her backstory.
And then this is followed up with a brief shot inside the palace, and we've got Gunray talking to his advisors, and they see on a screen that the battle started in the streets, and he says, I thought the battle was to take place far from here. This is too close.
This is too close.
And I never noticed until this viewing today, there's like more Nymodians in the background, like 4 or 5 of them just kind of standing around. The first couple times or the first 30, 40, 50 times I've seen this movie, I always thought it was like Naboo, just citizens of Naboo. But if you stop and you look closely, no, it's actually other Nymodians. They're just not wearing any of the headgear or anything like that. And I don't know, it's something every time you watch a Star Wars movie, you pick up on something you didn't see before. Okay, so we get back into the hangar, and we've got a shootout with the droids that are there. Anakin is told to find cover, so he finds cover, and the pilots run for their ships. Anakin hides behind a crate, hides behind a beam, and then climbs up a ladder and gets in a ship. And meanwhile, R2-D2 is conveniently loaded into said ship, and then all the N1s take off, and one gets shot down by a tank. So, happy accident there, I suppose, Craig, or is that a little too convenient? What do you think?
Yeah, the whole sequence with him is something I always ask my students when we watch this, like, how much of it's luck, how much of it is the Force? And, if you want to go either way, you could just say, the Force, is guiding him into this. This is his destiny. But yeah, it's very, very convenient that R2 is right there, and it's on autopilot and takes him right there. And, he's following, but I love the fact that he's following the letter of the law, and that he actually brings that up later. It's like, Qui-Gon's told me to stay in the cockpit. I'm just going to do it. And, we'll see Anakin do that a lot later on. Like, this is the letter of the law. I'm technically not breaking any rules. So I love that we actually get kind of foreshadowing for that stuff later.
Yeah, very, very true. And I this is just a scene that I really appreciate. I like the fact that the movie moves so fast when you get to the third act. Padmé lays out her plan, and then they're just doing it. And then if you don't stop and think about it a little bit second, they created a diversion. The Gungans drew out the droids from the city, and then she had Panaka and other guards set up a diversion so she could get into the hangar with the Jedi, and it's all going according to plan so far. And they defeat the droids, and the pilots get to their ships. And we've already discussed the book a few times, but one of the things I thought was neat about the book is that Anakin had that vision of Padmé, of her being a warrior and leading an army from the front. And it's this very scene here that he's envisioning of her commanding troops. And so it came to be in that way. So we get to space, and the N1 starfighters are approaching the Trade Federation ship. And we get to see the launch of all the droid starfighters. And then Rick O'Lee, as only Rick can, tells us exactly what we're seeing on the screen. Fighters straight ahead.
Always.
Yeah. He must be fun to take road trips with. But
there's a Home Depot. There's a Wendy's.
Traffic is slowing down. So, but at any rate, so Tom, what did you think about the space battle here? And one of the reasons I ask is that it's, to this point, one of the probably most impressive looking ones, but it's again droid fighters versus these N1 fighters. It's not quite X-Wings versus TIE fighters, or in my estimation, but others may vary. What do you think?
I thought, when this happens on screen, it's really, is it the first space battle of the movie? I was trying to think about that as you're mentioning, but I think it's the first time we've had engagement of like fighters in the movie. So it was very welcome when I recall as I was watching that finally we get some space action. And this first battle is what brought my love of the Naboo ships. The Naboo ships across the board are some of my favorite ships in Star Wars, from those reflective cruisers that Padmé flies in, to these N1s. And so it was nice to see that this happen. And I wanted to go back to just very quickly, as they're taking out of the hangar, you mentioned that one that gets shot, and I was like, what a cheap pot shot that stupid tank did. But I love how the direction of that part of the film is, we watch that starfighter all the way down to the demise and the explosion hundreds and hundreds of feet below. And I just, so many times I've thought about, like, why do we put a focus on that, other than it gives us that sense of loss, and it gives us that sense of cost, that this is not just going to be some fairy tale battle that we're going into. These pilots are going to be A, outnumbered, and B, facing a difficult task. And so I really think that this battle is important for lots of reasons. One, we finally get to have that space battle, but number two, we get to see how formidable is the Naboo defense, and from Theed, and the and that security force that they have in Theed. And so I don't know. I think it kind of fills all of those. Then the last thing that comes to mind when I see this, you had mentioned, Dennis, that things start to pick up here. We start going boom, 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 boom. And to me, it's classic Star Wars peak climax, where you've got the battle on the ground, you have the war, you have the space battle, you have the insurgency of rebels or resistance going in. And so it's like, okay, this is really starting to get going. And so now we're going to have in this movie, it's 4 theaters that we're going to pop back and forth from. And this just sets up the final one. So I think it's great. I love it.
And Craig, I'm going to probably keep going to you with my ring theory questions here, but again, this is a similar echo to what we see in both A New Hope and Return of the Jedi, for that matter, with a smaller force attacking a large station in the case of A New Hope and Return of the Jedi, and battleship here and the Phantom Menace. What do you make of that comparison? What is your takeaway from that?
Yeah, it's just a masterclass in editing for one. Like it keeps the tension going back and forth and back and forth. And one thing that just popped into my head that I was reminded of is that this was early DVD, and I remember that you could kind of splice together like a lightsaber battle was one thing I wanted to watch all the way through, but so you could kind of do that. But I really do appreciate, and especially now, you talked about how fast it is, and some of that is some of that's the pacing, and some of that is the editing. I want to know what happens next because I didn't quite get to see the end of this section, and so it goes to the next one, and it just keeps ramping it up. And yeah, it's like they did this in Return of the Jedi, and this is like the next evolution of that. It feels like in a lot of ways.
Indeed. Okay, so the action returns to the ground, and Gungans are squaring off versus the battle droids. The Gungans are hiding behind their shields, kind of waiting out the bombardment from the tanks that are firing upon them. And then finally, the lead battle droid, calls for them all to halt, and the legions of battle droids get unloaded from the transports. The Gungans start to get ready for this. Now that you mentioned the similarity to Infinity War, I'm really seeing it here with their personal shields that are up there, and they're getting all their bombas ready. And then we get a brief shot of the Trade Federation ship, and they activate the droids, and Captain Tarpals, I guess, is like ouch time, and so the droids go marching in there. My viewing today, I was like, when you're paying attention just this segment, those battle droids are a lot more creepy than when you consider them in the bigger scope of the film. Because I almost feel like some of the other moments hurt this in a way, because the Roger Rogers and oh wait, that does not compute. Oh wait, you're under arrest, and then bam, he gets chopped in half. When the first time Qui-Gon gets Padme to the hangar, but just in this moment, when you see the sheer number of them and they're all unfolding in unison and pulling out their blasters, it hit me, I think, for the first time ever, that this could have been terrifying if you were on that field with them. But Tom, what do you think?
100%. I made a note on that exact thing. I said the battle droids in their small groups kind of silly and comic relief, but I almost think that it sets this up really well to be a menacing feel, where there's just regiments and a huge amount, a number of them, and so they become very menacing as an army. And then to add on to that, we get and I don't know the names of the music in the score, but you get that military anthem that rises when you start to hear their march. And yes, 100%. As a Gungan, I would be terrified, especially when you see them first push their way through the shield, because they don't just walk through it. You see those first ones like lower a shoulder a bit and work their way through it. That's terrifying. It's like in a horror movie where you've got the bad guys ripping apart the wall or something like that. And then what the notable comparison to that is, there you got Jar Jar standing in front as now a commander. And I kept saying to myself, really Jar Jar's going to take leadership of these people that had kicked him out of the city, and he's there going steady.
Right?
And I'm like, really, Jar Jar, really? But then the joy of it, the comic relief of it, is he's like, I don't know, the Mr. Magoo of battle, because he's doing his job, but he's doing it in sort of a faulty sort of way. And so, yeah, to your note, the droid army does become quite impressive, but on the other side, quite fearsome.
What do you think, Craig?
Yeah, that Trade Federation march, that theme, that leitmotif is really imposing. Like that lends, I definitely overuse the word gravitas on my show, but like there is a level of gravitas to these droids that happens because of that, and then because we hear that same theme when we see the clone troopers when Jango Fett is or when Obi-Wan is observing them on Camino later on, and it works for that, and you're like, oh wow, that's super impressive. Same thing works, that same effect works here. And then I have another thing that struck me, because Star Wars influences many things, but it also has been influenced by lots of things. And now that I've read through the Dune books, I see that shield thing, and it doesn't go through fast; it goes through slow. And I immediately go, "Oh, that's just like the Atreides." That makes sense.
Oh,
That
good call.
probably borrowed from there. But yeah, Tom, I love that you put that, like that they're pushing through. That there's this determination that happens. And I don't think that I've ever really thought of the battle droids as being scary, but you're right. And the more I think about it in this scene, we talked about how the Gungans only have defensive weapons. They don't really have offensive weapons at all.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
now we're seeing that their big shield that should have kept them safe is the one last thing they had is being penetrated pretty easily.
Mhm.
Mhm. And I think there's something to the fact that the battle droids like have no eyes. They're all these white skeletal looking robots, and it's one thing when they're again doing Roger and walking all kinds of different directions, but when they're moving in unison and you can't distinguish one from the other, you shoot one down and there's two more that take its place that look
Mhm.
just like it.
Yeah.
It adds to some of that that feeling that you get
Like a
there.
hydra. Yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I will say too, just after having really dissected this movie this year and then getting back into the novelization and everything, just the fact that the Gungans realized that the reason that they were there was to be a diversion and that they were willing to risk their entire civilization basically for the Naboo, and that this actually wasn't the whole like main part of the war, quote unquote, that they were just serving as
Mhm.
a diversion, but they were
Mhm.
still willing to do it.
Indeed, indeed. So back in the hangar, the droids have been dispatched, and the plan is, according to Padme, that they're going to go look for the Viceroy because he's probably in the throne room. And as they're walking towards the doors, Qui-Gon points a finger at Anakin and says, "Stay in that cockpit." And then Anakin starts protesting, "You stay there." And so we've touched on that, but I love the father figure in this and all that, and the rebellious kid on the opposite side. But then the doors open to reveal Darth Maul. And we get I'm going to kind of skip ahead a little bit in this little brief scene in the hangar, though. But yeah, Qui-Gon says the Jedi are going to handle this, and Padme is like, I'm not sure it was intended to be comedic, but I laugh every time I see it now. She just,
Yeah.
well, we'll take the long way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They have no idea who this guy is, other than he, probably was the one that attacked Qui-Gon on Tatooine, and he's by himself, but that's enough.
Mhm.
And then the Jedi and the Sith start getting ready for battle. Taking off their cloaks and getting their lightsabers out. Maul does ignites his double-bladed lightsaber, and both Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon, and almost in unison like theirs, and they begin their fight. Okay, pausing for a second here. They gave away the double-bladed lightsaber in the trailers
Mhm.
for this movie, and I really wish they had not, because I think that would
Yeah.
have been just an incredible reveal in the moment. But Craig, what's your take on that?
So, I get to watch this movie with my students every year, and they have not, a lot of them haven't seen it, and a lot of them haven't seen the trailers. And so I kind of get to watch it vicariously through them.
Cool.
And so one thing that I notice now is that this is the first time we get to see the horns on his head, because
Oh.
every year I show that to kids, whoa, that happens. And then, yes, the double bladed lightsaber and is new for a lot of them, which is pretty great. But yeah, you get the score kicks in, Duel of the Fates kicks in it. And yeah, it is pretty hilarious that like, we'll take the long way. It's like, yeah, you will, because you have no idea what you're up against with this guy.
Yeah. How about you, Tom?
This is the first time I've really taken the time to notice Padme and the soldiers, the security force, when they see Maul, they quite literally like, whoa, like they step
Mhm.
back and they recoil slightly right before she says that line. And so it just shows the power of like image, that he is so frightening that a security force with weapons is like, okay, this is not our scale. And
Mhm.
coming from, and I thought it was notable that Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon were behind the security force, and they step through them when Qui-Gon says, "We'll handle this." And I was like, they were allowing the Padmé's group to take the lead on this. Now, granted, they know the path and all of that, but I thought it was a bit symbolic as well, for them to step forward to handle Maul. And I have to say, even though, and I want to say the action figure also had the double-bladed lightsaber before the film came out, it's still, even today, when I know it's going to happen, it still has, I feel like, the exact same response that I had the first time I saw it. And it was just like, that is so cool. And then because you know what's going to happen next, and it's the greatest lightsaber battle to date. And even still today is in many people's top 5 lightsaber battles, with Ray Park playing Darth Maul, and the physicality of it all.
Mhm.
And it's a magnificent moment. And I love how one individual changes the entire plan. The Gungans are out there fighting a massive army, and here one individual is going to divert the plan. And so it shows the power of the Sith, and the power of influence, and really the power of the unknown as well. One other thing I wanted to mention was when Darth Maul lights the saber, and then they go to Anakin and Qui-Gon, or Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon, and they light theirs. I'm like, their lightsabers look so weak and ordinary, and like kind of like lightsaber toothpicks or something. I'm like, that just looks unimpressive. And I wondered if it was intentionally made to look smaller, because I don't think they look as long, and I think they look thinner, and it's probably just in my head. But I just was like, this does not look like it's gonna go well.
Indeed. By coincidence today, I can't remember what I was looking for Star Wars news, and I came across a blurb where Ray Park was talking about the double-bladed lightsaber. And originally, when they went to start filming lightsaber scenes, they gave him a saber that had a regular size hilt. And he was explaining to the prop guys that this was going to be something of an issue for spinning it, and didn't think anything else of it until the next time they went to shoot. They brought him back the full-size double-bladed lightsaber hilt that he could use to twirl and spin. And he's like, oh, didn't think they took me seriously, but there they go on that. So, from here, Padme and the guards don't get very far before the droidicas roll in. And this is when Anakin starts pressing every button in the cockpit, which is exactly what you don't want your kids doing when you leave them alone in the car. And, he's closing the cockpit. He sets the ship in motion. And then finally he finds a trigger, and he blasts the droidicas. And, I guess, fortunately, Qui-Gon's too busy fighting Maul to reprimand him to get back there. But at the time, and so they take off, but then the fight with Maul really gets underway in earnest. And what I love about it is that you've got, among the many things I should say, Maul, who is so extremely competent with his weapon and is confident enough to take on 2 Jedi at once. But then Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon are showing how well they work together and their experience together, because Obi-Wan immediately jumps over Maul. And I never thought about that much today. There's the joke that goes around that, Anakin jumps over Obi-Wan and gets his legs. Anakin jumps over Obi-Wan and gets his legs sliced off in Revenge of the Sith. And of course, Obi-Wan jumped over Maul. He was supposed to be some impossible thing, and slices him in half. But he leads the fight with that so that they can come at him from 2 directions. And then they immediately herd him out of the hangar and away from Padme and the guards into, I don't know what you call that room, but it's got all the platforms and the beams, the energy beams going from floor to ceiling in it. But we kind of talked about this battle a little bit. Let's the saber duel, I should say, head on. Tom said a bit about it, but Craig, what are some things that stand out to you about the battle?
No handrails, first off. So
Never.
just
Never.
ridiculous. That I just love it. It's enormous. But them working together in tandem was definitely something I picked up this time. Like Obi-Wan faints, just like a fake little move, and then it backs off, and that happens. And it's just so acrobatic, and just it's balletic, and it's just so beautiful. And the score is swelling. I'm getting goosebumps right now just thinking about it. But yeah, it's just such an epic setting when they get into that room. It's ridiculous, and I love it so much.
Any other observations, Tom?
Yeah, the one moment that really jumped out at me was they they do all the parlay and the sword play and everything, and then there's a moment when I think Maul is across. He goes to a different platform, and everyone kind of gets a stance to sort of reevaluate the battle. It's like the end of the round, and they're re-rolling initiative or something. And they do this close up
Yes.
on everybody's face, and all I could think was, what a great good look. Our first good look at a Zabrak face. And Maul's got his nasty teeth, and he's grinding his teeth at them, and just that moment I was like, okay, this is great, because we just watched some amazing fight. We watched Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, competently handle his acrobatics, but it feels like maybe he has an upper hand here, even though you've got two accomplished, you have Jedi Master and you have Jedi Padawan. Was he Padawan?
Yeah.
And but clearly a very well advanced Padawan. And so when they do that moment of zoom ins on each of their faces, it's like, okay, resolve is being set, and we're in for another good round of battle, which is exactly what you want. You don't want this to end too fast. And so I think that was a really dramatic moment, those zoom in shots.
Jay, you have any thoughts on this?
Oh, I'm with you guys. This is definitely one of my top lightsaber fights in all of Star Wars, and there's so many points that both of you brought up as far as the way that this was shot cinematically, just the feel of the music, and just the overall competency, as you pointed out, between Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan and their ability to handle Maul. But yet it was also very realistic feeling too, because at some points you even see Obi-Wan's boots kind of slipping here and there. And so it's just, it's not so choreographed that it looks overly fake, that it looks so real. But yet it is balletic, as you said, Craig, as well.
And I appreciate that the difference between Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan in this fight is that Obi-Wan is like, we have to get across this gap. I'm going to flip over it. Meanwhile, Qui-Gon is all business. He just leaps right across. And, there's still some of that brashness left in Obi-Wan from, he's a Padawan at this point. And he's probably never been in a battle like this in his life. Not that Qui-Gon's fought too many Sith at this point either, but Qui-Gon's all business when it comes down to it. Okay, so the scene momentarily shifts to Theed Palace. Amidala is leading her contingent of guards down a hall when they encounter a bunch of battle droids and get pinned behind statues on both sides. This is really the last time that they show up in this segment, so if anyone's got any final thoughts on them before we move on, now's the time.
The only thing I have to note on that is the take charge of Padme. She looks over to Panaka and says, "We don't have time for this, Captain." And it shows the urgency and how she is staying on target and not being deterred by these blocks. And so something is coming up, that they're going to change plans again and maybe take a longer way around. But I really liked that line when she turns to him and says, "We don't have time for this."
Yeah, if I could just build on that, like, I love the way that you emphasize that, Tom, because now I'm thinking it's not that I'm worried about my life, or I'm not worried about the danger. Like, this is an inconvenience in a lot of ways, right? Like, I have a mission to accomplish, and this is just an obstacle in my way. And it's frustrating, and I don't like it.
Yeah,
but I'm more concerned with I have to accomplish my mission.
Well, to that point you're making earlier, Tom, they did not account for Maul at all in this plan. They had no idea he was going to be on Naboo, and so they had to take an alternate route. And to the point you're both making now, that this is, this was not in the plan. We're on a clock. We got to get to that Viceroy before he leaves, because if he does, he's coming back with more droids. So yeah, I hadn't actually plan on spending any time discussing this part, but here we go.
Because they'd already taken the long way around. So
Exactly. So back in space, Anakin starts to catch up to the other ships. That's where the autopilot's taking him. And then we immediately go back to the Gungans. The droidicas have now made their way through the shield. And we get a charge of Gungans on the Cadu. And then half a battle droid lands on Jar Jar's back. And he freaks out and causes the droid to reflexively start to fire. And he manages to get about 7 shots off, taking out 3 battle droids in there. I'm of two minds of this. It's when I talk about it, I get a little annoyed because of the silliness, but then in the moment, I always end up enjoying it. I think it's just kind of a funny addition. But how do you all come down on that, Craig?
I'm one with the Force, and the Force is with me.
Okay.
All
Tom?
is the Force wills it, man.
Yeah, as a 30-year-old when this movie came out, I was a little irritated with the comedy of Jar Jar. And really, for that matter, a major battle in the hands of what I saw at the time, a bratty child. All the while, Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan and Padmé are in the fight of their lives. But over the years, and even in that moment, I thought, you know what? What am I doing here? This is Star Wars. It's meant to be fun. It's meant to not be taken too seriously. And it makes me think about like the Indiana Jones movies and the Last Crusade when Indy and his dad are in that plane and they go through the tunnel and they like slide up next to the the Nazi on the motorcycle and they all kind of look at each other and I remember thinking, okay, that kind of takes me out of the movie, but at the same time, what fun! I mean, what a joke! And so I had to change my mindset of like Jar Jar and Anakin as a child and just kind of go with it and have fun with it and stop taking things so seriously. And once I did that, I found it all to be just enjoyable and I accept it as comic relief in something that's really serious. And it gives Jar Jar kind of legendary status of his ability to kind of make his way through dangerous situations in a silly manner. So it's noted, but I've gotten over it and let's have fun. And that's what this is all about.
Yeah. And I think this viewing, especially, what occurred to me is that how all the Gungans around him are reacting, which is, there's some of them are ducking, some of them are, leaning out of the way and things like that. And these are all CG characters. It's, they went through the length to create this computer generated imagery to get these realistic reactions of all of his fellow combatants there, his fellow soldiers in the situation. And they didn't spare anything on that. I mean, the Gungans are not shouting at him. They're just trying to get out of the way and get on with the fight. So,
Right.
Okay. Well, the last bit we've got is back in space. The Naboo starfighters are attacking the Trade Federation battleship. Rick proclaims that the deflector shield is too strong and not quite as on point as it usually is, but hey. And then Anakin yells at R2D2 to get them off of autopilot because otherwise it's going to get them both killed. And immediately R2D2 manages to accomplish this. And then R2 tells Anakin that they should go back. And Anakin protests, like, go back. Anakin, as you're pointing out, Craig, Qui-Gon told him to stay in this cockpit, so that's where he's going to stay. And then, of course, we get the I'll try spinning. That's a good trick. So, that's the final moments we get of this segment here. So the battle's not going great there in space, but we're about to get some luck thrown into all of this with what Anakin can do. Craig, what's your take on this?
First off, like anyone that has a problem with his performance, I don't know if you've been around 9-year-olds anytime recently,
Exactly.
but that's how they act.
Yes.
Yeah, but I do. I love again. Like Qui-Gon told me to stay here, and that's what I'm gonna do. He's calm though. He's not. I don't think he's being reckless. I think he's excited more than he is anything.
Tom?
That's a good way to put it. In this moment, I like how Anakin is actually kind of becoming a diversion. He's sort of the unknown to the droid, the droid pilots. They're not pilots. They're the vultures. he's almost as much of a diversion to them as Maul is to
Mhm.
the rest of them down on. And so it's kind of a cool, when you look at it that way, it's kind of a cool um, comparison between the two. But so he becomes a diversion up there, and you have to look at it and just have a good time with it. But I keep going back to like, what's R2's deal, man? This is not, and I keep thinking, okay, so this is the beginning of R2's like life with us as fans and viewers. And so R2 has to grow into his quote sassiness and
Yeah.
independence as well. And I mean, what we get from R2 in this 10-minute block is his ability to be in the wrong place at the right time, and it all work out, like when he gets sucked up into the N1 starfighter that Anakin happens to be into, and without getting shot, just like the first moments of A New Hope, where he and 3PO are walking across the hallway and blaster fire is going all around him. So it kind of gives us that introduction to, okay, here's R2D2, and he's been this way from the beginning, but his personality and independence will grow as we go. So that's what I get from this space battle and Anakin's interactions with R2D2. It's fun.
Yes. And I'm so glad you brought that up, Tom, because I was thinking about that myself in, R2's personality, because realistically, this movie is the genesis of his life. And so his very first mission was to save the ship, and he was the only one that didn't get blasted off of the hull. And and now he's just kind of coming into his own, and he's learning, and he's developing as his own little droid brain can. And so these are just his first steps. I mean, he's basically just a toddler at this point, if you want to look at it from the droidism standpoint, and where he goes from here. I mean, you think about his journey, and it's kind of mind-blowing.
Yeah, I just kind of like it. He knew the autopilot was on and that he could turn it off, but it's like that was keeping Anakin safe, just like
Right.
Qui-Gon commanded. And it's like, okay, fine, this isn't going so well. Now I've turned it off. Let's go home. And Anakin's like, no, I got what I wanted. So
Right.
let's try spinning. I love that. So, all right. Well, that brings us to the end of the segment. This was fantastic. We got way more out of this than I thought we were going to. So, Craig, Tom, thank you both so much for joining us this evening on this. Before you go, I want to make sure you both tell everybody about your projects and where they can find you. So, Craig, how about you go first?
Yeah, Reading Between the Reels, we're a bi-weekly podcast, and you can find us anywhere you listen to podcasts. And we're about a quarter of the way through our Marvel Before the MCU series. We're covering all the films from Blade 1998 all the way up through the second Fantastic Four movie right before Iron Man. So we've covered Blade, X-Men, Blade 2, and we just dropped our Spider-Man episode. And so it's been really fun to kind of look at how the MCU, it's kind of like the proto MCU in a lot of ways, and watch how those films interact in a way that maybe we hadn't thought of before.
Indeed. And Tom?
Yeah, on Teachers in the Dungeon, my co-host Dan Ream and I, we spend the time talking about RPG gaming in education, the impacts on students, and the collaborative nature of RPGs. But then we also talk about Dungeons and Dragons, and just talk about the game, and we recap the games that we play. We interview creators of the game, all the way from people like Jim Zub down to people who are making dice, and talking about their path through the gaming world into this hobby of theirs. So it's a ton of fun. And if you're a teacher, oh man, I hope you really check us out. But if you just love the game, check us out as well. We're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. We have a YouTube channel where we put some of our highlight shows on there. But the show itself, you can find on all of the podcast feeds.
Fantastic. Well, guys, thanks again for coming on the show and joining us for this discussion. I'm a big fan of both your shows. I've been really digging the Marvel Before the MCU recap you doing, Craig. It's been fun to go back and look at those movies. And then Tom, I'm living vicariously through your, especially your episodes where you go and recap your all's adventures, because got to play D&D with you briefly, a while ago, and that was a lot of fun. But it's been years since I've been able to do it regularly. But again, thanks for joining us.
Always a pleasure.
There you have it. That is the 11th episode in our Phantom Menace series. Thank you all for joining us for that. We hope you've enjoyed it. And if so, make sure you're subscribed to the podcast so you'll get the next entry in the series next month when that rolls out. And while you're on your podcast of choice, make sure you like, rate, subscribe, whatever the options are there. And then head over to retrozapp.com where you can find all previous 797 episodes of the show and some other great podcasts such as Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Case Files, Animaniacast, Brews and Blasters, Dorklair, Doomcast, Enjoy Stuff, Love, Death, and Robots Plus, Superhero Suite, and Warp Trails. Jay, you want to go ahead and remind everybody one more time where we can be found online?
Sure. Just like spinning is a good trick, it's a good trick if you'd support us too. So we are on Facebook, Instagram, and X at Podcast Stardust. And we also maintain some Pinterest boards over on our Pinterest page, as well as 2 YouTube outlets. So you can catch us on the traditional YouTube as well as YouTube Music. So head over to both of those, like, subscribe, and please share those out. And those do support comments and reviews as well. So please interact with us there. And we do have a Discord room on the RetroZap Discord server. So we are just one of many different shows over there. All the RetroZap shows actually have their own room. So if you'd like to get in on that, the link to that will be in our show notes. Also in our show notes is the link to our TeePublic store, where you can pick up one of 7 different show logo designs, all with Podcast Stardust swag. So if you are interested in doing that, and it does help to support the show, please hit up that link in our show notes.
All right. You want to give everybody the lowdown on what you got going on as cosplay?
Sure. So right now, I got all kinds of things just wrapping up. So you can catch all of that over on my Instagram, which is at j.snipscosplay. So I'm amping up for GalaxyCon Columbus in December. So that's my next big event. But until then, you can catch me as Ahsoka, 2 different versions of Hera, the Fourth Sister, my original concept Mandalorian, Princess Leia, as well as some other fun things that are not Star Wars, but, like weird Barbie and such. So once again, that is at j.snipscosplay.
Okay, upcoming on the show. On Friday, we've got Star Wars news. And then on Monday, we're getting back into our Clone Wars rewatch with a look at episode 13 from season 1, which is called Jedi Crash. If you've been following along with that series, just note that we are skipping over episodes 11 and 12 because we previously covered them on the show. I'm going to try and remember and rebroadcast those sometime this week if I haven't done so already. So be looking for those on your feed, and then join us on Monday for that. So with that, just want to say thanks for listening to episode 798 of Podcast Stardust, everyone. Have a great rest of your week. And until next time, may the Force be